The Peripheral is the Amazon sci-fi drama about a young woman who is able to connect with a dark future. I'm Matt Noble, and I am joined by the crew of The Peripheral, the Emmy-winning costume designer, Michele Clapton, and the Oscar-nominated production designer, Jan Roelfs. And I want to just kick things off by asking both of you, what was the most important thing for building the world of The Peripheral? And we'll start with you, Jan.
What kind of question is that? Hold on a second. There is no such thing as what is the most important thing. Maybe it's slightly different the way I think Michele and myself work. It's just the most important thing is to analyze the script, the story, analyze what the director because I have to realize I've never done TV, so I don't ask me the questions about how TV works. I have no clue. Neither I want to know. Let's put it that way, because for me it's the same. So, but because I've heard some about showrunners and directors of this, for me there is a script. And somebody is directing that script. And so that's how I prefer to talk about it, because I don't know all these rules, and neither I care. But for me, that's the most important thing, is to start, of course, to analyze the script and what do you want to tell? What kind of story you want to tell? How do you want to tell it? What is the mood? So that's how I always start. Yeah, so there is nothing like most important thing. It's just to understand and how you analyze that and how do you give that shape.
Yeah, exactly. We're storytellers. We're visual storytellers. We should analyze the words. We should discuss with the director. I mean, the first thing I do after that is go and see Jan, or the production designer, because invariably they started before me and they've started building this world. And my characters have to inhabit that world. So I have to really understand how they live, what's their economics, everything about them, what do they do, how do they live? And that's the way in, I think. And I think usually color as well, Jan, isn't a way in?
Yeah.
To think about how we want to look at each group and how they live and what colors, and start to discover that way, really.
It is, of course, in this case, it's based on the novel of The Peripheral by William Gibson. Anybody who knows William Gibson is an extremely detailed writer who writes in extreme detail about the future and about all the methods and what's happening in the future, what kind of tools they have. And so that is, in this case, was a very big thing to analyze that alone, because it's a very complex and dense novel he wrote, and understanding, and then, of course, to analyze what the team want to do with that, because it's not his book, it's a script based on that novel. So it makes it always a little bit more complex than an original story, because you have sort of a big guideline, but at the same time, is that the guideline you want to follow? So that makes it always very complex in movies where it's based on a very, very detailed novel.
Yeah, it's true, because it's so easy to get drawn into one way and then actually part of the team really see it in another way. I think we were lucky in Vincenzo because he had a really good understanding and rapport with William Gibson. So I felt I was sort of in quite safe hands a lot of the time with that, just discussing with him and I mean, discussing all the time, really, I suppose, about how they should be and what they do. And also, I also think it was really important to compare the two worlds and to really establish Clanton as a really believable place, which I thought sort of rooted it and anchored the whole thing.
Well, you do, and you do, as you're talking about, Michele, there are sort of two different time periods in particular you're looking at. You've got 2032 North Carolina, and then you've got, I think, 2099, if I'm jumping to the right time zone, but and then quite a bit in the future London. So what was it like sort of building those sort of two worlds and keeping them distinct from each other, and designing almost two shows?
It's not that hard, as it's well described, that it's a near future as Gibson describes it, and on the script. It's a near future where lots of people, especially in an area like North Carolina, America's on the verge or just on the verge of the Civil War. So he's predicting, this book was written a little while ago, but he's predicting exactly what's happening right now. So you analyze what's happening, and if you go to North Carolina, for example, and you're on the wrong side of the track, you will see exactly what's happening. Poverty, there's no hope, there's no, factories closed down. So we got a very strong guideline there to say, like, hey, we keep this world bedded in what is almost now, because it's 32, but it's like 19, whatever it was, 2021, whatever. But honestly, I don't really never care about period movies, about the dates. I mean, I don't, as if it's 20, they say, like, I've done quite a few period movies. They say, oh, it's 1890. I'm like, oh, really? Well, I look out the window. I mean, Amsterdam right now, the homes are from 1612. It's 23, so I don't see any difference. So there you go. So that's not where I think, it's not where I start. It's like, what kind of world, what are you telling? Where are the actors, where are the characters living? So the characters live in an area where there is no hope. There is no, you can see it. The streets are empty. Nothing has happened. So that's, you need to find, what I'm saying, when you start, I'm always trying to find a red line, from A to Z or whatever. So to see what is the world they live in, what do you try to tell? And then later comes the details. But in the beginning, you say, is it bleak? Is it happy? Is it sad? Is it, you find all the big words first, and then from those words you start designing, let's say, because I don't care about design. It's just a, production design. It's such a strange word anyway. It's just analyzing and giving a world for the characters to move in. And
exactly, and I agree, Jan, that you always, I mean, when people say period, as you say, you can look around and it can go back. I mean, the older people tend to dress old, whatever, and poor people try and they wear whatever they can find, or they wear something, of their fathers, which did in this case. But as long as you don't go future in time, I think you're fine to plunder wherever you are. Really.
And so there was very strong guidelines about where Clanton in North Carolina was, where the world was. Only the slight differences is where there was a printing store is now a 3D printing store. So you can see with a couple of tools and a couple of ideas, the cars were not there. Nothing was, but a couple things you see, it's the future. But the rest is still as it was maybe 20 years ago, 40 years ago. Maybe it's there from 30 years from now. It's just, for sure, Clanton will look the same. The door still hang on 3 hinges, and a sign is still the same, and the postman probably, maybe less, comes over. But it's more, in the Gibson world, it's about what they use, what kind of toys they have, what kind of tools they have, what kind of props they have. That's where you see it's a different time. Compare that to London when they travel, because it's all about a movie about time travel. And when they travel in time, they go to London. Now, London is, as it was in 1880, it still looks like London. There's lots of streets, it hasn't changed one little thing. What has changed is, again, details. Now, one of the big details he describes, because this is London after the Big Bang, let's say, he calls it in the book the jackpot. And the jackpot is a domino effect of climate change and multiple pandemics and whatever disasters. And so London is back on track after all these, he describes in 2070, all these things are happening. It actually happened in 2020 with the first, pandemic, blah, blah. So it's happening more. So he's described that. So London became a city of the rich who can afford it. It's happening, like New York, like Los Angeles, like London, it's happening in this, So London is a city of the rich. Okay, that's another thing, a big key thing. That meant there's not a lot of people there. Only 10% of the population was left because the rest died or can't afford it, or they're not there anymore. Nobody questions where they are. They're not there anymore. So those two things are, for me, strong starting points to start creating those two different worlds. And so that's where the whole process starts, and then you start talking about how can we visualize that, how can we colorize that, how can we give it details, and that's a very lengthy process about how, where you say design comes in. I don't like the word design. I don't care too much about design. It's you creating a world for the characters to live in.
These various places, Canton, for instance, I'll then look at a character like Flynn and just try and say in her clothing something about her. What do we want to feel about her? She's tough, but she's sentimental. So you try and build a character that people buy into without her having to spell out exactly what she's about. And the same with her mother and her brother. You identify elements to them that people understand them, and they get drawn into the story. They're sympathetic to the people they should be sympathetic to, and sometimes you want to mislead them. This is the whole thing. This is part of the storytelling, of course.
But that's exactly that's exactly how it is. I mean, for me, production design is the same thing. See, you want to create a character who has a bad mood, or it's pictures tell stories. So design is a big word. It's more working on like what you want to tell. What do you want to portray to the audience? Are they in a happy environment or in a sad environment? Are they joyful or they're not? Are they you can do so many things with a lick of paint with a small detail. That's where the power is. And
I like the idea that someone can look at a person and know sort of 70% without them opening their mouth. Like, this is this person. You just know where their person is. And then taking Flynn into the future London, it was an idea of still keeping the same, I guess, proportions to her costume. So it was still a bomber jacket. It was still sort of, it was leggy. It was the idea of how she might be there. I mean, I can't really explain it, but I didn't want to lose her into something completely wild and huge shoulders. I wanted it to be a transition that you could still recognize her. It was just a slightly enhanced version of her. And I thought it was particularly interesting to actually use a period pattern cutter to cut a modern costume, because they didn't fall into all the traps of like, oh, it has to be sharp, it has to be, no, it can be something quite soft and still have this sense of other. Yeah. So I thought that was sort of quite important to do. And then as far as the various groups within Future London, and we have the neoprenes who sort of value everything the original and old. So it was really interesting to sort of, I guess, almost magpie-like, find elements which were important to them and actually have this sort of used color palette. And then you had others like, I don't know, the oligarchs, Lev Zubov, who sort of decided plundered German Street and Savile Row. And the whole idea was, you start thinking, well, where are they getting all these songs? It's all made up. And then, well, maybe they're printing them. Maybe they're just creating. They can create whatever they want, but they actually can't remember exactly what it was like. So we started playing with different proportions of check. And in Gary's costume, for instance, it's an idea of a pocket, but it isn't complete. So it's almost this sort of glitch of things aren't quite finished off or complete. So again, there are costumes we recognize that we're not alienated by, but there's something, if you actually bother to look at the details, you'll notice there's something which is just a little off all the time. So I feel a bit like, it's not like, wow, this is a really super futuristic new look. It's like, no, it's not. It's something recognized, but it's edited, it's glitched. There's something that just shifts it from what you really know. So that,
I think we did that throughout, I think, with everything. And because as London is not a futuristic city, it's a very old city. So we stay with the theme of an old city, and only the details in there are futuristic, modernist, but the world we created are very classic.
And I think that what for me works so well, because if you have, it wasn't shouting, this is futuristic at everyone. It actually, as you say, it's one or two pieces, the wonderful towers. The rest is just London. And I'm so fed up of seeing, well, let's just say it's been so done all this, it's a futuristic costume. It has to, everything is forgotten. And we can see, like when we went to the jackpot, you can see sort of what's happened. You can see the process.
Yeah. Something Michele, like, I think is interesting. I love how you talked about the sort of through line between Flynn's costumes in both worlds, but a distinction that, like, I thought of too was the Flynn in North Carolina. She sort of dresses herself, where the Flynn in the future, that's been sort of designed for her by others to project things. So what do you think the biggest distinction was between Flynn's look in the North Carolina and in London?
Well, it was obviously without color, and it was quite, I mean, it was a lot sleeker and slimmer. And I had this, I mean, I guess I based it on the idea that maybe they were watching and maybe they were understanding, and it was their version of it, to try and sort of make her pleased with how she looked, which I think she was. It was like she's not a young girl with confidence. She's a tomboy. I guess it was trying to give her some sort of weird confidence, but then also, I mean, I also had to think about her action. I mean, she fights all the time. She has to be able to move and run, and you know, I can't suddenly put her in a floaty dress, which would have been completely wrong. So it was just a way of trying to something really practical. The other thing we didn't want to do was keep changing costumes throughout it. I mean, we did end up making about 10 of those, sort of all different sort of elements to it. But on the whole, she could pretty much do anything in that look. And I think it was something that just sort of fitted well into the space. And I was particularly interested in doing the print, the dark print on a dark print. So you had a matte on a sort of gloss. And I really like the way that lights. I think that's something we always try and think about as designers, that what is the camera going to see? What is interesting for the camera? How is this going to move? How is it going to enhance, I guess, the shot in some ways and make it distinct? So I was pleased with that, and I really liked the way it fitted, and I liked the fact that there were 3 or 4 elements to it, but it just all smoothed almost into one and kept its shape really cleanly. But yeah, that was it really.
I was going to ask you, Jan, what's a choice that you made that you're particularly proud of or pleased with how it turned out?
Oh, I never answer those questions, because it's, for me, it's an overall thing. I can't say one thing. Yeah, it's just I'm not busy with that. You know,
It's okay.
No,
we can move on. We don't have to answer.
It's because, you know, well, because what it is like, I think a lot of people make a mistake. You go too much into detail. I prefer to try to oversee the whole thing, and the whole thing should work, because that's, for me, it is a strange title, production design, but it's the overall thing. So that's why I think the stronger you can start, the stronger you understand the material, the stronger a director's vision you support. That's, I'm happy with that. If the result like that works, that is, for me, then it works. But you know, I'm not proud of it. No, I can't be. You know, of course, certain things work out better than other things, because you always learn from every job you do, so yeah, you avoid that the next time. Certain things you try. I'm always very, very. People say that. I don't know. I'm not aware, but I'm quite often very bold with color, because I think color gives an incredible mood to pictures, and sometimes maybe people like, you went a little too far, but at the end, it always anyway. But so I thought overall, with the because we did a lot of illustrations, of course, for this movie or show, whatever you call it, and yeah, so because that's you have to realize, in the feature world, that's what I do all the time. You know, the studios ask, you know, to basically give a couple hundred of images of what the movie will look like 8 months in advance. without help of a cinematographer. So what I'm trying to say is that we create so much mood already from the beginning on, and and that quite often we set in those things very strong, very high, very, so to really embed it into a world you understand. And sometimes those illustrations are maybe too bold, but because you can't achieve them, but it's a big starting point always for me.
But that's what's so useful to me as a costume designer. If I come into a project, usually after the production design, to have that to look at is just such a great step forward into understanding the show. And then I guess it's the same. I have to try and understand the whole of it before you can start designing part of it, because you have to, there are sort of rules in a way that to define the group of people you want. Yes, how they live, what they blah, 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 but also you want it to be clear. You don't want it to bleed into something else. And then when you get there, you go, oh, I've already used up that element. I wanted to, so you have to be, I think it's really important to have an understanding of the whole and then go back and start, start with who you see first. And I also think it's always really important initially, especially when you're doing real character stuff like Flynn, is you have to have a really good idea, but then also have time to play and work out things. What does look good in there? What colors are the walls going to be? How will that sit in that room? And I think that's a really important thing. So the idea of having, okay, well, it's this costume for this scene and it's this costume for this scene. It's a wardrobe. I want her to look like she's gone in and pulled some stuff out, and that's what she's wearing that day. And really, I should be happy with her wearing any single thing from that wardrobe, because it should look like it belongs to her. And I also, the other mistake, which is so easy to make, is to give someone like Flynn too many clothes. She wouldn't have that many clothes. She reuses and she rewears. And as I say, I love the fact that she wore the big sort of coat she wears when she's riding her bike. We learn later is her dad's coat, because it's a way of sort of, it's a protection for her, it's a protection on the bike, but actually she's also wrapping herself in her dad. And so they're just like little understories like that, which you don't get to know until later, but it was something that was really important to me, especially with this sort of tough little character. I wanted to get that nuance that she's not that, there's so much more.
Let's go broad. Let's go like big picture, big world sort of stuff. What do you think what do each of you think's particularly compelling about this world and about this story of The Peripheral?
Well, it's a big, Gibson, his novel is a big saying about where the world is going. And so it gives a big reflection of how people react to modernity, how people react to new tools, how people, so for me, that's why I liked it, that it's it's a little attempt to what the world could be in the near future, let's say. And so that's, for me, was the exciting part of it. And not that I know what the future will look like. Nobody knows. We only know what it looked in the past. But but that was the attempt, and I really like that. I really admire his work, and so there was to understand the novel, understand the material. That was quite exciting to work on. And I've done a few other futuristic movies, let's say, and so but that's why, as a production designer, to design the future, I always say, like, I don't know, don't ask me. For sure, a door will still hang on 3 hinges. I don't, or you want to go it up this way or sideways, I don't, whatever. But that's not, to me, the story point is not about that. And on this one, particularly not. So yeah, it was close to what I like to do anyway. And the other thing is what was amazing about this one is it was, because I don't know TV world, is this was shot as a feature. So it was a full length 100 whatever day filming. We shot locations out. Directors came in and out instead of, you shoot 2 weeks and stop 3 weeks or 2 weeks and another one, whatever. We didn't do that. It was shot in one in one go, as one the way I always work on features. So that was a nice, because the other way around, I don't know if I can put my head to that.
It's a really long feature. Really, really long feature.
Well, I've done quite a few of those 100+ day shoots, so that's okay. But the only thing what was confusing is that there was, in this case, there were 2 directors.
I think that's what, I mean, having done lots of TV and a few movies, I think the thing that film people find hardest, and I understand it, is the having more than one director, and it's odd. And I guess having worked on big series, I mean, it's when the showrunner becomes the person you talk to, because they have to oversee, for me at least, the whole show, and directors come and go throughout, and it would be a nightmare just to sort of change it all the time. But yeah, so it's different, and it was a really interesting way to film. And I guess for me, the reason I was interested is I hadn't really worked in something futuristic before, and this idea of pigeonholed into sort of medieval or whatever, you know, it's just really nice to stretch your legs somewhere else, because at the end, they're just clothes telling stories on characters.
Yeah.
And we try and do it the best way we can, and to tell it in a way that we think is appropriate, and I guess entertaining to some extent. But it's not even that. No, it's storytelling. It's about being able to tell a story, visual story that is true to the script and helps the script and enhances it.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny, like, so, like, since you work more in film, yeah, like 2 directors is like double what you're used to dealing with. But for Michele, who's worked in TV, it probably didn't seem like that many at all, just dealing with a couple. So that's sort of fun.
I think we shouldn't go in there, because I still don't understand the word of that one. Why there's 2 different directors? I don't know why this one director can't do it. I don't.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
I have to say,
There's one production designer. There's 2 DPs. There's 2 this. There's 2 that. I mean, I don't understand. But let's not go there.
Okay, are you sure? Yeah, we can go on if you want.
Wow.
To say, recently working on films again, having one director was such a treat. I really liked it, because you develop a relationship in a way that you don't with anyone else.
Somebody analyzes the script and wants to tell the story through that person. You know, somebody has an idea, a vision, and so I understand, of course, with a showrunner, blah blah. But what is
it's
then
removed? I know.
I don't. Yeah. But anyway, this is apparently for the Emmys. Oh,
yeah. Yes.
Anyway.
But like, how much do both of you collaborate with each other? Because you've talked, and I loved how you've talked about you're creating worlds, you're creating moods, and I imagine for that to be particularly successful, there needs to be good collaboration and good communication between departments.
As Michele said, I started way before Michele started, so I create first that world in terms of illustrations or references, or color palette. So when lots of other people come in, because everybody reads a script and probably read the novel and everything, everybody has an idea, but until a point you say like, hey, no, this is where Flynn lives, and this is where future London is for now. I'm not saying that's written in stone, but so there's constant back and forward. It's the same when the cinematographer comes in. He said, well, really? Is that a bright world? Oh, yeah. Well, talk to your director. I mean, that's how we discussed it, and that's how we set the tone. So there's always constant with the head of department. There's constant, as Michele knows, my office is one big open book, and everybody comes in, and the boards are all out there. Everybody can see, because it's not what I want. That's what we discussed with the team to get that sort of the world we want to create.
Exactly.
Now, come to details, there are sometimes conflicting things, especially with color or texture or materials. You say, hey, let's be careful. Let's not, or if you want to have an orange person in an orange wall with an orange light on it, that could be a powerful image, but maybe not. So of course there is in every detail comes to, it goes from the big picture to the smallest detail. You constantly discuss it with each other.
But I also felt really lucky a couple of times. We had discussions, and then there were a couple of times when Alita first walked into the operating room. It just looked so amazing with the mirrors and the blue and the jacket we did. And then I think another time when Cerise walked into her office, and I designed a zigzag coat, and I really didn't know that you had actually designed the same zigzag cut in wood on the wall. So there are these wonderful moments where we're, wow, we're really in tune.
Yeah,
but
it worked really well. And also you have to realize on this one, particularly, the big part of the pre-production was in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So everything, we had 2 or 3. I had 3 nights because I was in Amsterdam. Some crew was in London, some part in the LA, some part in New York. So we had 2 or 3 times a week from 6 p.m. in my time till 10 p.m. Zoom. So we did everything Zoom for 2 months, 3 months straight, which was pretty extraordinary to do it that way, but it worked.
And we constantly lost crew as well. We were like, I would sometimes be 2 design assistants down, or the cut would be gone for 2 weeks, and so it was quite stressful in that way. And I think there wasn't the freedom to wander onto set and wander here, there, and everywhere as we normally would. So I think there was a little bit more trust needed sometimes when you actually really couldn't go and see someone because they were. It
also drove me crazy because I have to share it with everybody. So good luck. I don't want to do that normally because I don't want to have everybody's opinion. So, but it was what that's saying. It was extraordinary how we did it. Of course, then became the practical element of creating it for real. But for me, the big part of pre-production was done on Zoom and sharing images the whole day long with, I had like 3 computer screens on my desk and working in the daytime with the crew and illustrators and blah, blah, and draws. And then at night sharing it with, showrunner and directors and producers. And so it was quite a complicated 2 months, I think. For me, it was like almost 8 weeks. We did it that way.
We didn't have the access that we would usually have to actors as well, which was hard. And they came in quite late sometimes. But hey, that's what you do. You make it work at the end of the day. I mean, you can't say you're not ready,
But it was I thought it was a very, very, the way Jonah and Lisa picked it up and put the crew together. It was quite a good setup. And I was actually very impressed at the way we did it. And it turned out to be, I was very pleased with it. And very complex show, lots of very complicated creations to make, from wardrobe to propping and everything. It was very, very, very complex, and lots of strange tools and toys, and which quite often also, if you there you saw also that sometimes by talking in person things go so much faster, because now you develop a skill over the Zoom that it works, but sometimes by grabbing something you're like, not at all. It looked great, but when you get it for real, it's something you can't do it all online anyway. But it was luckily after that we had a little time to create everything. But and also what was good from the producer side of the thing is that we shot in London for real, and we went to North Carolina. So that was extremely helpful. Although, of course, I'm not going to go into details. A lot of stuff in North Carolina was done in London, and some London stuff was done in North Carolina, but nobody should know that and would know that.
Yeah.
But
we shot all the North Carolina scenes in London and all the London scenes in North Carolina. No.
Most North Carolina stuff was done on stage in London. And that's how it works. But because most of the stuff was done on stage. And,
but I loved all the layers of characters. I love the layers of character in Clanton and then into Future London. It was great just trying to individualize each group of people. I found that really fun, and we managed to print a lot of our own fabrics and weave a lot of our own cloths, and it was just so important to be able to do that. It was a really good fun to do. And you can be so precise with, we dyed everything. I love that ability to be really precise with the colors you want and the textures you want. Just to have that facility, which we did have, was really, really great, because then you can go anywhere. As long as you have a great workroom and a great team and great dyers, you can create anything, which that's what I really like doing. I love, the cutting and the creating of things. It's just so exciting.
Yeah. Well, I think there's no better place to end than there, talking about that you can create anything, and you guys have in the Peripheral. And as we've mentioned, this is for Emmy Award consideration. So the best of luck to both of you and everyone who worked on the Peripheral for the upcoming Emmy Awards. People can go to goldderby.com for our awards coverage. And I'd just like to thank you both so much for your time and sharing your perspectives and exploring the world you've created in the Peripheral.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right.